Beyond Survival is the official podcast of Waymaker Institute. Our desire is to equip you as a follower of Jesus to thrive. Each episode reveals how the gospel impacts the entire human experience for the advancement of God's kingdom. Ultimately, Jesus' promise of abundant life means we are meant to go beyond survival. So, let's jump in with today's episode.
Hey, welcome to the Beyond Survival podcast. Today we are coming via Zoom. Thank you, Zoom, although not an official sponsor of the podcast, maybe one day. But we have Amy Seiffert, and Amy is, I'll ask you, how would you describe yourself? Because you have a lot of different professional, titles and things that you do. But if I said, "Hey, Amy, who are you?" How would you answer that?
Ooh, the $1 million question.
Yes.
Man, I just learned a term recently that I was like, that encapsulates who I want to be.
Okay.
I want to take scripture and help others use their holy imagination to put themselves inside of the Bible stories.
Okay.
So I'm an evangelist and a teacher, but I'm also a wife, a mom, an author, a speaker, a tennis player, a chocolate lover.
I love it. Yes. Yes. Well, I saw your website. I did not see tennis player and chocolate lover on the website. So you may need to update that profile.
Add some of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how long have you been married?
It'll be 22 years this spring.
Wow.
Yeah. And you have 3 kids.
I have 3 kids, and next year they'll be in 3 different schools because of their age range. So I have a sophomore, I have a 5th grader, and I have a 3rd grader.
Okay. So then I want to ask you a question, because I've been asking parents this recently. So Sophia has 2 young ones, and then I have 3 in elementary school. So they're all in the same school. So you have the spread. When you look back at parenting and the different stages, I know that your oldest one is kind of more, I guess, newer into teenage. What has been your most enjoyable season of parenting? What age season is the most enjoyable as a parent?
This might blow your mind. The teen years. I
don't believe it.
I
don't believe it.
I didn't think I would say that, because teens kind of scare me. They did scare me. Guys, teenagers are hilarious. Robbie is my oldest, and he's hilarious and witty and dry and trying things and using his critical thinking and pushing back, but still respectful. I mean, I love the stinky boys over, and they eat and they play. I love it. I thought it would be terrible. I love it. I love it way more than diapers. I'm sorry, because it's a while until the teens, but
yeah. Hey,
I think it's fantastic.
Do you believe her?
I mean, I do. I really do believe you. I don't know. I will pray that the Lord will do the same for me.
I will pray that for you too.
Yes. Right now it's it's hard, but I control I control his life.
Yeah. Yes.
And when they're a teenager, I can't do
you
that
don't.
anymore. So
no, I just watched his friend pick him up, and they went in the car together, the two of them. I literally, I was that weird, I was almost like a puppy dog. I had my face.
Oh, for sure.
Watching them, I was and I could tell my friend was your mom's watching us go.
Yeah.
It's weird.
So just on that note, then how, as a parent, what has had to be the biggest transformation in you as these different seasons and stages of child, your children have developed? What has been the biggest transformation in you that's needed to take place as your children grew older?
Oh my gosh. Well, it's still a need, and I'm getting better at it a little bit each day. I am not naturally empathetic. And God, I have 2 boys.
She just said amen.
Yeah.
I would. Yes. So, yay for the Spirit medicine, therapy, all the things. I am learning to be a compassionate mom who stops and sympathizes, empathizes, and moves toward my kids with compassion first versus like, get it together.
Yeah.
But like, oh, that's hard. Like I'm training. I'm in practice. I'm in training with compassion. So yeah, that I feel like constantly in the fire about that and being forged into a compassionate person because it does not come naturally.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so cool. Wow.
What do you learn about that?
I think similar. I mean, I am a very emotional person. I'm very sensitive. But compassion can be difficult when I'm on the outside, of the situation and I'm looking in and I'm just like, all right, guys, this is ridiculous. The Lord is working on my attitude, my, posture towards those things. But I really think it is, as hard as that is, I have found it to be a great invitation to learn more about Jesus. So if you are not naturally compassionate and you feel like I'm a terrible person, especially if you are a woman and you think you're supposed to just be this innate,
like it's
compassionate
automatic
person.
Nurturing.
Exactly. If you're not, it's a beautiful invitation to learn more about Jesus in a way that maybe other people naturally already do. So I think it's a gift.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Amy, so this podcast is the official podcast of Waymaker Institute, and Waymaker Institute is this school. We have multiple different programs. One of the kind of the underlying things we do is really help young people help to define and refine, affirm God's call in their life. So, at 18, 19, 20, those questions of like, what am I supposed to be doing? And well, everyone else is going to a 4-year college. I'm supposed to do 4-year college and spend a lot of money to figure out what I'm supposed to be doing. And so we have we have multiple programs, but really we help both through teachings and different environments we put them in. We help them articulate, hey, I think this is what God's call is on my life. And so this is what it means for my next step in my life. And so I'm really fascinated as you talked about all the different, roles that you fill, even professionally. You're an author, you're a speaker. How did you know those were the lanes that you were supposed to move in? Because especially nowadays where content is so widely available, I mean, it's everywhere. And you chose this route of, producing content in different platforms and in different ways for a purpose. So what was that journey like for you to say, hey, this is where I'm going. This is what I think God has called me to?
Yes. What a great question. So after I became a believer through Young Life, don't know if you guys are familiar with Young Life. I got involved into a local youth group, and my pastor asked me this question, my youth pastor. He said, what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to be? And everything inside of me in that moment, I was 15, and I said, I want to talk to large amounts of people about things I'm passionate about.
Okay.
And he was like, okay. And in my head, I thought, I actually don't know how many women I've seen doing this, though. Like, what does it look like for a woman to speak, write, preach, teach, lead, put content into the world? Like, that was back here. That was in my heart. And I got involved with Crew, Campus Crusade for Christ on campus. And opportunities arose to start to write some Bible studies and teach some small groups. And then I would say where God said, you're going to have to solidify this in your heart was my senior year of college. I was a leader in the movement, and I was paired up with a young male intern. And we were going to come together and talk about content for a co-ed fraternity and sorority Bible study. We were trying to get off the ground in some places. We were like foraging in some of these wild places on campus. And I came with lots of thoughts. I had been praying, I had content, I had books I wanted to us to walk through. I was very excited. And I sat down and he said, okay, I've been thinking, what if you like just bring the brownies and I'll take care of the Bible study part. Right. Jesus. I be near, Lord. Yeah. So I remember
my eyes.
I can feel the
right.
I love that.
Yeah. So I'm the student in this situation. He's the like intern on staff, and they thought in theory this is a really great match. But I walked away from that meeting really deflated and rejected, and like my brain spinning, because I felt like the Spirit had put this in my heart, but it didn't seem to line up with this man's theology that kind of represented the staff team. Like it just was disorienting. But I look back on that moment 20 years ago, and like God really asking me, like, are you called by man or are you called by me? And just having to like, I'm called by you. Like and bravely going to the head of the staff team and saying like, I see you co-lead with the other team leader, and but this was what happened. Like just having to, so all to say to your question, I am constantly unraveling the narrative that a woman can't do these things. Or when I step up to preach in my church, I'm on the teaching team at my church, to stand in the confidence of the Lord and not in everybody else's opinions, and trust him and his call. But it's challenging.
Oh yeah.
Do you relate to this?
There's so many thoughts. I'm like, can we just have a conversation off camera?
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm gonna shut my mouth for the rest of the episode and just let you two talk, and I'm gonna learn.
No, I love this. Okay, first I need to say I've already stalked you on Instagram, so I'm just gonna put that out there.
That's fair.
I was looking at your Instagram the other day because I was, I wanted to know who you were and prepare. And I don't know how old this post is, so do not judge me. But you made a post where you were kind of talking a little bit about when you felt the Lord kind of calling you to this, and how in your mind you like pictured Oprah. And I was like, oh my God, this is my woman, because I want to be Oprah when I grow up forever. I love her.
100%. Yes.
Yes. And I can relate so much to your journey as someone who is also a teacher and a writer and who helps preach at our church. It's interesting. It's a little different. The denomination that I grew up in had women pastors and teachers. And so that was something that I was exposed to as a little girl. And it was just something that was automatically, for me, I know this is rare, but was assumed that this is just what both men and women did. It wasn't until I went to school and got older and started getting exposed to more belief systems that I realized, wow, this is actually not a normal, commonplace thing. And it was in that season of life where I really had to wrestle with that concept of who's called me, but also, how do I say this? Have a quenching of my fiery spirit. I'm a very fiery person, very much an advocate, justice, righteousness.
Yes, let's go.
Lean into, which is a beautiful thing, but the Lord really had to kind of hone me back, because when it was getting kind of melded with my own flesh, my own, like, I need to propel myself and my mission forward. And so I wonder, even though our journeys are similar and have differences. How did that, as you began to realize this is what God has called me to do, which I feel like I'm going to go on a tangent here. I feel like having this calling of I'm called to speak and teach is already, especially in our culture, we have to be so careful with that. And we have this, how has the Lord given you or taught you humility in this calling? Because I think a lot of people want to be called to teach and speak because they think it's this glamorous thing.
Right.
How have you had to walk in humility in that? And how have you learned to yield to his guiding of your spirit?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm still, I mean, I feel like always before I have an opportunity to teach, I mean, right before, I feel like pretty weak. Like like my knees are buckling. Like I feel like, can I do it? Like faced with and the humility of like, God, you have to show up. Like you have, or rather you are here. Would you move through me in a way that would speak to people that's only from the power of your spirit? So having to really practice that Philippians 2, like emptying yourself, like, God, fill me, because I cannot do it. That's one of the ways, is feeling that like right before. Also, there's a gift in I can wrestle because I don't have a seminary degree, and it's just fishermen being called into these things with uneducation. But it's been good for me to, with both pastors I've served under on the teaching team, I'm a writer first. I will submit my sermon to them and say, hey, help me out. And it's been so good to collaborate and not think this is on me. This is like I have to prove something or be, that keeps my pride in check. Like I'm not alone in this work. And to humbly submit that to other people is a really good practice, because sometimes I'll get it back and they'll say things and I'm like, I think I disagree, but now I gotta figure out, so this like ebb and flow. So I think checks and balances and the team really keeps humility there.
So good.
Yeah.
As a communicator, I tell this every year to our students. For me, there was a definitely a humbling journey in my communication, how I communicated, whether it was preaching or teaching, and it had to do with God shifting the target of success in my communication. And so that has to do a lot with my personality, my bend. But when God began to wreck my sense of success, or to really sanctify it, I began to see this shift. So before it was like, okay, I can hone in my teaching ability and my practice, and people would be like, oh, that was so good, or you're like, that was the best message ever. Like I would get those comments, or
right.
That was, that was so good, or I love when you teach, and that kind of felt really good. Actually, it felt really good. I was like, oh, I feel so good. And then God was like, man, is that your target? Is that is that gonna be your target in your teaching and your preaching, versus like kingdom work actually happening, like and you talking about like the Spirit of God actually through you changing lives, doing work, like I mean, like actually seeing fruit of the kingdom of God begin to be produced. And that was me really, like from in regards to my teaching skill sets or preaching skill sets, maybe not a lot changed, but internally, I mean, so much work. And so now it was like people would come up and say, man, like God spoke to me, like God, like I had an encounter with Jesus, and that target began to shift and say, like, it really isn't about me. And if I can be a vessel and use my gifting and the Spirit use that, like, that has to be my target. And ironically, I hear less, oh, you're a great communicator. And hopefully it's not because I'm on the decline. Hopefully it's because there is a different, marker of success.
I love that.
Yeah. So in your line of stuff, where, especially when you're talking about, a lot of what you're doing is not attached directly to a local church. I know you're on the teaching team, but a lot of your stuff is even outside of it, and you're reaching a lot of different audiences and scope. There are a lot of metrics involved, and numbers and strategy. How do you balance that of, like, well, at the end of the day, there is some metrics and numbers involved in this, but I have to be mindful of, like, what true success is. What does that journey look like for you personally?
Yeah, that's a great question. Last summer, I was asked to speak at a really large church, and it's a church that have known for a while. And part of what they wanted to do is I had to show up on a Wednesday and give my sermon to no audience, so give it in the auditorium to the camera with just like 4 people, one of them the lead teaching pastor and 3 others, and they would evaluate. It was a run through. And then sit down, and I had to learn, like, where to stand and where to put my hands with the screen, and like,
Wow.
It was such high production that I hadn't been a part of, that brought a lot of anxiety of, like, I need to prove myself. I need to do a good job. I need the praise back that says, like, well done. And these, you know what I mean? Like, the production aspect, really. After I was done with the run through, which we don't do run throughs at my church. It's just like on a Sunday here, but here's what it is. They said, I really think the feedback was, we need to rearrange your entire sermon. And you have, 3 days to do this, 2 days. And I walked away thinking, I mean, I was tearful. I was overwhelmed. I had such a pressure. I felt like it just, and I went on this walk where I just put in worship music, and I was like, Lord, I need to release the flood. Like, what is the thing? How am I supposed to do this? And I felt like he was like, after Sunday, after you preach your 3rd time, maybe three times to preach, if no one says good job, do it like to be in communion with me. Like, if you get 0 praise back, would it be enough that you used your gift and we did this thing together? And really having to settle myself in that. So when there's production involved, really just having to say, like, and then when it comes to even like social media, as it's grown in my life, having to say, I'm going to post this, I'm going to pray about it, I'm going to post it, and then I'm going to walk away. I am not going to coddle it and watch the reactions and, like, stay just real close to it and pet it. And, I'm just not, I need to walk away. And this too is in God's hands. So
that's really good. So how do you, and how do you couple that with actually, like, positive feedback, right? Because there's an element to your gifting and to your craft and to even your content that, like, there is such thing as positive feedback. So how do you balance those two of like being in a moment where you feel so crushed, but also inviting that?
Yes, I know. I try to take the positive feedback and say, it seems as if this is affirmation of what I felt like the Spirit said to share. And that's about it. Because the minute I start living on that, because I'm a recovering people pleaser and the addiction to the approval of others, like I am in recovery as an Enneagram 3 that likes shine and like,
let's go.
Yeah. And so for me to continue to say, like, I do not live or die by the opinions of others. Like I cannot. Even Proverbs 25:29 says, like, the fear of man is a snare. Like the Hebrew word is like a noose around your neck. But those who fear the Lord will be kept. I want to be safe in the Lord and not feel like so it's constant. I am, this is something until I die, it might be a thorn that I'm constantly throwing back any praise or disapproval.
That's that's my new life verse, just so you know. So it just got changed from John 3:16. So
there you go.
Just kidding.
Oh man, I'm curious. Your book Starved and this journey that you've been on, and even relating it, the people that listen to our podcast, not everyone is a teacher or has a big following. They have different vocations and different callings that God has. But I think that this concept can translate no matter what your calling is, this idea of people pleasing, this idea of wanting to be affirmed and seen and noticed. This almost innate desire in us that we have to be seen and be praised, I think does often produce in us anxiety, this spiritual malnourishment that you talk about. Can you explain that concept to us, this concept of spiritual malnourishment, and how maybe these things of achievement, people pleasing, wanting to be seen, tend to suck the life out of us? Can you just lean into that?
Yes, absolutely. The idea of spiritual malnourishment and being starved. I mean, the idea of being malnourished is you're not getting the nutrients that you need, just like sort of basic. And so, which, to just give the picture, my son, this concept came when I watched my son about 4 years ago lose about 15 pounds in 6 weeks, and stomach pain. He was lethargic, depressed. I mean, there was something really wrong. And neighbors saying, Robbie's looking a little thin. And I was in denial. Like, he's growing, like she's about to shoot up. He's fine. But it was that whisper in the night with my husband laying there, as if you whisper, it's not quite so real. Like, do you think something's wrong with our son? And until we got the diagnosis of Crohn's disease, and then said we have to make a diet change. Like, inflammation is destroying him, and we need to change his diet. I felt like the Lord was like, and you need a diet change. Like, you are consuming. Like, I was staying up late, going to Google for answers and rehearsing fear after fear of the future, and just eating, consuming, taking in things that were starving my soul. So that idea, I really relate to, even feeding on the approval and applause of others can also starve our souls. And this is where, and you mentioned this before, seeing Jesus see us and letting him that nourish our soul. I cannot get out of Luke 15 of the parable of the son, the prodigal son, and specifically Luke 15 verse 20. I can't get away from those 5 verbs. They feed my soul, that are assigned to the Father. It says he saw his son. He was filled with compassion. He ran, fell on him as to envelop him, and he kissed him. And really, part of nourishing my soul has been using like a holy imagination, taking my imagination, quieting myself and imagining God seeing me Like, I see you where you feel unseen and disregarded, and even in all the thankless motherhood tasks and the diaper changing, all the places, I see you. You are not erased in this story. I am filled with compassion for you. Like, you may have blown it a million times. My compassion is my empathy plus action, and I am coming for you. And I am embracing you, and I'm kissing you, which is that kiss was that sign of reconciliation. Just really feasting on one verse that helps me see God and myself in a way that will be a nourishing narrative that I need. That's really the heart of the book. Where are the places that we are starving? What are the new spiritual practices, narratives, breath prayers, scriptures?
That's so good. And we were talking before we started this, before we got on, how much like unity with the book and the concept of the book, and then this idea of Beyond Survival, this podcast of saying like, hey, maybe we as followers of Jesus have forgotten what like abundant life looks like, and what an abiding relationship with Jesus looks like, and we're just kind of like surviving, or we are malnourished, like we just don't have what we need to thrive in this life. We talk a lot about like spiritual rhythms and spiritual disciplines that aren't just these religious practices to make us feel better about ourselves, but like that truly they're part of us having this abiding relationship with Jesus. And as you were talking, I started to pick up on some of those that you were just mentioning in your flow. So can you just hone in a little bit more on, for you personally, some of the most like critical anchoring spiritual rhythms that you've practiced that has helped you move out of this starvation?
Yes. I'm not naturally a quiet person. Like, you can hear my laugh, like, and people are like, Amy's in the room. Like, what I scare people with my laugh. You know what I mean? And I like noise. I like silence has been a practice that God has asked me to practice. I am not good at it. And for any of your listeners, if you try to practice silence for, say, 5 minutes, the first 4, you might feel like this cat that's trying to find its nap spot and isn't settling in until finally that last minute,
That's a perfect picture. Yes. Oh, yes.
And then that last minute is really serene and lovely. And then, like me, I have an alarm that goes off because it's 5 minutes and I'm out of the So silence, that's even the first chapter of my book of trading, sort of a meal replacement, right? Because my goal is not to say, hey, we need to add a bunch of things into our life. It's like, no, let's look at the plate that we actually have, and what's not feeding us. What's cotton candy? Like, it's good for a second, but then you have like a stomach ache and you're hangry. Like, what are the things? And remove that. And so for me to put my phone down regularly and to pick up silence and to let myself be loved, again, as an Enneagram 3, to be loved simply because I breathe and because I'm an image bearer of the Most High. That's such a good healing practice for me.
So can you dig in deeper into the practice of silence? What is that for you actually doing to your soul, to your mind? Like what is happening in those moments? Even in the 4 moments of like struggle, but what is going on there in your soul?
Yeah. So I work from home and my kids are at school. So I try to practice 5 minutes of silence before they come tumbling through the door. So around 2:30, 5 minutes, what it looks like is grabbing something warm, trying to find a window and settling in. And it's been longer, which is lovely. I'm building my muscle. I'm practicing my silence muscle. But often when I sit down, the grocery list comes through my brain and things I need to still get. And so there is no shame in that game. I will just write down and then put write down, milk and eggs, and then keep sitting.
Mm.
And sometimes Richard Foster has a practice called palms down, palms up. So sometimes which I know you guys, rhythms practice all things. So really practicing palms down and releasing the anxiety and the worry and the fear. If I sit for 5 minutes, what will happen? Things don't get done if I sit here. And God is like, correct. I've got it. But such a but there's healing that happens. I find a sense of the sovereignty of God, truly, that God is saying, I have it. I have you. I have the world. You can stop. Similar to practicing the Sabbath, like he multiplies that time, which I'm blown away with every time. He does. And sometimes I do feel like he'll bring to me in the silence my next 3 points for a sermon. And I have to practice staying there and not going to go start writing the thing. And just sit there. I will also say a lot of silence isn't very glamorous. Sometimes I just sit there and let my blood pressure get a little lower and try to find a bird to watch and remember Jesus said there's birds that are taken care of and you're so valuable. So it's often not anything like that, but over time it's healing the hurry that I have to keep going to be loved.
Wow. I love it so much. That is like I love Richard Foster. We love the book Celebration of Discipline.
Yes,
we're
big fans.
Yes. And the palms down, palms up is a practice that I've been doing for the last few years that has really, when I do it, impacts the anxiety that I struggle with so much. And I think so many people struggle with anxiety. It's especially today, because we now more than ever have so much screaming at us. But I love what you said about the sovereignty of God. I think it's something that we don't often think about a lot. I think, at least I'm speaking for myself, I can be prone to think more about obedience, because obedience is connected to this idea of works. So it's like, if I am serving God and I am doing all of the right things and I'm making sure I'm hearing his voice, which is really my voice, and following what I think he wants me to do, and then I get to the end of that and I'm exhausted, it's like, why do we feel exhausted serving God? Like, shouldn't there be an element? I mean, it is work. Like, there is an element of work to this, but shouldn't there be more soul fulfillment? Shouldn't we, as followers of Jesus, maybe look a little bit different than the world does when it comes to serving our careers and serving our ambitions? And I think there's something that you're leaning into even with this book, and I think it's going to be so impactful, is there is this connection that we have as followers of Jesus, of feeding our souls through a practice of silence and solitude and Sabbath, and how that can distinguish us from this emptiness, this burnout, this exhaustion. How have you seen, you talked about with like even Sabbath, God multiplies your time. How have you seen the sovereignty of God in your own life personally, when you have started to surrender this idea of achievement and fulfillment and getting things done? Is there any particular instance you can reflect on with God's sovereignty in your life?
For sure. I have like 100. Okay, so this one, I have ADHD, so I'll just put that out there. And it was a Sunday, which we practiced Sabbath, and I try to take a nap. every Sunday since my kids were little till even now. I'm like, I'm going to get a drool nap in. And so I had napped, and my husband had left to leave for out of town for 4 days. And I had just got up. I was, still kind of tired. And I look at my text was like blowing up. My phone was. And I was like, what's going on? And it was like, hey, Amy, we are just getting so excited for you to come speak at our weekly meeting this week with like 200 college students. It's going to be great. And, what do you need from us? Blah, blah, blah. And I, for the life of me, did not have that in my calendar. Somewhere along the way, it had slipped through the cracks. And I was like, no way. I don't have a message. I have to travel. I don't have backup. I have 3 kids. My brain was like, I'm sweating. Like I'm sitting here sweating from my peaceful nap. And I grab my computer. I'm literally grabbing it thinking, well, I got to get to work. Like I got to put some things together. And I felt like the Spirit said, truly, are you going to scramble after this, or are you going to Sabbath? Like you said. I was like, no. I know, it was just this moment, this like face off with the Lord. Like, are you going to trust me or not?
Wow.
I was like, I don't want to. And so I like slowly, it was the slowest closing of a laptop that's ever occurred in the history. I'm just like, push it. And I sit there on the couch, and I really was like, God, you're going to have to provide. I don't know. I don't know. I need a sitter. I need a server. I need the thing. As I'm praying that, he brings to mind a blog post I had written in the fall, like 6 months before that. That was the exact title of the title they were giving me to speak at in the weekly. I was like, wait, I think, do I already have this?
Didn't I do something? Yeah.
Did I do this already? Did God pre-plan? Is this like manna that he provided
there you
for?
go.
And now I'm just going to just sit here, it just was this moment of and then I start crying because I'm like, it is, I already have it. I have the things and what would it have looked like if I ignored the Lord and I spent the next, 3 hours trying to spin my wheels and would have discovered this anyways. It just was, that's one of those moments where I call back to that. That is evidence I have collected of the sovereignty and goodness and provision of the Lord when I don't want to rest and I want to produce and make a name for myself and accomplish and get the things done. And I have to remember, no, he's already provided. He has already done it. And I've got to trust him. So
I can relate really, really well to that. Because I think about, as soon as you started telling that story, I had, not really, it wasn't trauma, but I had this memory of it was a Sunday morning. I get awoken at 3:30, 4 a.m. in the morning from a text message from our pastor, and he's like, hey, I'm sick, I cannot preach in the morning. You have to, can you do this? And I'm like, well, yeah, I got it, and in the first however decade of doing any type of ministry, my default would have been, all right, it's 4 a.m. I'm up and let's go. Right. Like you just said,
time to do it.
I'm going to take the bull by the horns, and we're going to get the best.
We're going to crush this thing.
Stinking message in the world. And same thing, literally, and because it was what God was doing in me, obviously, but the Spirit said, go back to sleep. And not so I had an option to choose my own route, to do the work of the Lord, right? To choose my own right, or to be obedient. And I remember, not only did I say yes to going back to sleep, but I actually fell right to sleep, even though normally my, the anxiety, the emotions, oh my gosh, I've got to get up front of a lot of people.
The adrenaline.
Yes.
Right.
No, I went right back to sleep and woke up that morning, normal time, got ready, and God was like, hey, just tell people what you've been learning. And so I just remember that. And I literally, probably 2 months ago, I had someone say, hey, do you remember that one time? Like that message, God spoke to me in a powerful way. And I'm like, oh, okay.
The one I didn't prepare. Cool.
Yeah. And that just goes back, like you said, those markers or that kind of evidence that you're collecting. God is sovereign.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that we aren't good stewards of those times, but there will be moments where God says, hey, you know what? I got this. Right? I got this. And
you sleep.
Yeah, you sleep. And oh, by the way, I did create everything by my just spoken word. So
mouth. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I got this. So yeah, in this idea of being starved in our souls, and the idea of like anxiety and all this, the things we see when we look at culture, and especially when you start looking at the younger generations, how almost like young people don't even realize it's a thing because it's just so normal. Like it is normal. How can someone begin to identify in themselves that they are starved? Like what would be kind of the evidence or the manifestation of, hey, I'm starved right now. Like, I go to church, I believe in Jesus, but I am starved. What would you see?
Yeah. I love a good acronym. And so when I was writing the acronym OAT, which is a food word, so OAT, I would say, give yourself a little, am I overwhelmed? Am I anxious? Am I tired? And what's going on there? And so the idea of, am I overwhelmed, which literally means as if a wave is crashing over your head and you're underneath. And what am I overwhelmed by? And trying to think, okay, like for me, I'm often overwhelmed by the opinions of others. I need God's opinion over my life. What could I do? What does this look like? And I give a lot of practices and ideas. Or am I anxious? And I love the description of anxiety in the Bible. And it's the Greek word is merimneo, which means to be torn apart, to be divided, as if I'm in one spot, but my mind is over here with my kid at school and the choices he's going to make. Or I'm in my kitchen, but I'm thinking about the regretful words that came out of my mouth 5 weeks ago, and where I'm disintegrated. That's this torn. And what does it look to say, God, your peace, truly, Irene, that word is to bind what has been separated. God, will you bind me, this peace that will guard me, which is a strong word, like a word of strength. Will your peace bind me and keep me present right here? Often anxiety need a grounding exercise. So if you could assess, oh my gosh, I'm anxious right now about this. I feel divided. I feel torn. What does it look like for me to take a breath and to imagine God's arms, peaceful arms, binding me and keeping me present and saying, I am here right now and I am safe. Like that's what is true. I am here right now and I am safe. Again, all the therapy and counseling and all the things, but and then am I tired? Am I exhausted? Like what am I running after? What am I trying to produce? What am I seeking? What is making me exhausted? Maybe it's truly, I just need to get more sleep. I should go to bed like 45 minutes earlier the next few weeks, like really practical, basic human needs kinds of things. But OAT really helps assess, am I starving? What is it? What could be the next small, simple step to take?
That's really good.
Wow. I love that. OAT. Who would have thought? It's so simple, but that's so profound. And I didn't, that picture of being torn and then God's peace binding back together. I have not heard
so good
something like that. That is such a powerful imagery. Wow.
I'm gonna steal that.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Steal it for the kingdom.
But I said, because I said that out loud, I think that's covered, right?
Yes.
This is permission.
Copyright. Wow. It's a Greek word. Look, just,
okay. Hey, that's fair. That's fair.
It's
Oh, wow. How would you, and this is, I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of moms probably listen to this. You've been married for 22 years. You've got 3 kids that are still dependent on you. I mean, they're more independent than they used to be, but you're still, paying for everything, taking care of them, nurturing them. As a mom, as a wife, how do you feed your soul in these ways? I'm sure you maybe have wrestled with this, already know these concepts of your whole identity being taken over by being a mom. It's
these amazing, beautiful little people, right?
Yes. Something that I think so many women can struggle with is feeling like that's all they are. There's nothing else that God wants to do inside of them or through them. How have you wrestled with that tension? And what are things that you feel like God has given you to feed your soul that isn't just this like mommy self-care culture, if that makes sense?
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
I cried a lot in the first 10 years of motherhood. I felt like I don't like being low and unnoticed on the floor with Legos and puzzles. Like, I'm going to poke my eyeball out. Like, I just felt this constant unseen, like, and resenting the maintaining and sustaining that is so much of motherhood, like Groundhog Day over and over again. And I would cry and worship. I would be worshiping and crying and saying, like, I want more. I feel like I want to do other things. It just felt stuck. I felt stuck. And there were a lot of things that the Lord taught me, like, hey, your biggest platform are these little people. Like, don't despise the people. Like, and really feeling like there will be other opportunities and places, but right now I've called you to be pretty home. I was like, but I want to go. And so just wrestling with that, the humbling of life on the floor, is what I would call it, and the maintaining and sustaining. And God saying to me, I took a everyday spirituality class at Regent Theological Seminary, just like a handful of classes. And this idea of when we maintain and sustain our world, we are like God in his image who maintains and sustains the world. And just really finding, okay, in this everyday, ordinary place, I am imaging God, and it is good. It might not look like a microphone and lights and, getting these opportunities. So all to say, I cried a lot and I complained to the Lord a lot, and I talked to him. I feel like he put these things inside of me, and I just felt like he was like, I've got some things I'm working out in you. Like, I'm doing some things.
Come on.
And then I would say, in my current motherhood life, I really do feel like I'm getting to do the things that God put in my heart years ago. But recently, and I write about this, I didn't think that a walk with a worship song in my ears outside counted as prayer. But God said, no, that is like, let someone sing a song of truth over you, and we can commune with a walk around your neighborhood for 5 minutes in a song. Like, for some reason, it didn't feel spiritual to me. And he's like, it is. Like, what is this box you're creating, Violet? So I do love to say to my kids, and they can be home and all the things, like, I'm going to go on a walk all the way back, and I have a little neighborhood route. And I put in the blessing by Carrie Jove, and I let the blessings sing over me to just quiet my soul. That's a real normal, regular thing I do.
That's really good.
I don't know if that hit all the things. You had a great
absolutely
setup. Okay.
Yes.
I'm obviously not a mom, but I am married to one, and I can sense like just the deep empathy and connection of these words of moms who are just like, wow, I'm not the only one Like,
Yes.
there are others
You're
out
not
there
the only
wrestling
one.
with
Yes.
the same things that I am wrestling with. So, hopefully my wife will listen to this podcast. So kind of up in there.
I know. Yeah.
Kind of up in there.
Yeah.
It's a toss up.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to say for your listening mom who's feeling like this, like a little bit on hold, like God called me to be home for a while, or whatever that looks like. I just love the words, like the statement, "For now is not forever." Like, my babies aren't in diapers with Legos on the floor forever. I mean, they're just not. Now they're driving. Like, this season is not forever, though
That's
it
a
can
good
feel
word.
like it. It can really feel like it. I'm not saying it doesn't feel like it, but
That's a good word.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll I'll let you do the last question. I'll let you think about it. Okay. But so you have the book Starve coming out. By the time this podcast is released, the book will be out the following week. So March, what was the date that's releasing?
21st, March 21st.
March 21st. Starved is released, and it'll be available at any normal place you would purchase books. And then if someone just wants to connect, like not just with the book, but even just kind of what God's doing in and through you, would your website be the best place?
Absolutely. Website is a great place. I do like Instagram. I think it's fun on there too. So
okay. What's the website address? I think it's your first and last name, correct?
Yeah, amyseiffert.com. Yeah.
Okay. And same thing on like social media.
Yes, Amy Seiffert.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I just think, I think people are going to connect, especially if they see a lot of, like, again, similarities and connections. Like, oh, I would love to have a voice that can remind me of these things, that I can maybe see a little bit of myself in. And I would just even say, like, personally from Waymaker Institute, there's just a lot of like affinity, like, that I've felt in this conversation of just like, yes, that. I mean, even when you said everyday theology, even the idea of we're trying to teach our students of the beauty in the mundane, and how this is part of how we actually worship and recognize who God is in some of the mundane. There's just been a lot of similar things that's been really cool to hear, even with you all the way out there in Ohio. Is that
Ohio? Yes.
Ohio. Which I don't know if you're a Bengals fan. I just wanted to give my condolences if that.
I think we are. My husband is born and raised Cincinnati.
I'm so sorry.
My son woke up and said, "Did they win?" My third grader. And I said, "No, babe." And he looked at me and he said, "Then what's the point?"
Oh, hey, I feel that on a deep level.
Like, of life, like, what's just the point? Like, it just was so.
Oh, I love that. That's so good. That's so
day.
good.
Yeah, we're sad over here.
This isn't a sports podcast, but for what it's worth, the Bengals should have won. And
I agree.
For what it's worth, I feel like the Super Bowl would have been a better Super Bowl if the Bengals were in. But again, this is not a sports podcast.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes.
I feel seen. Thank you.
Okay, good. Good. All right. Bring us home, Sophia.
Yes. So why, you've spent a lot of time, energy, prayers writing this book. It is obviously a message that is so dear to your heart, and that you believe in, that this world needs, the church needs. Why do people need to know that Jesus wants more for them, whether they are stay-at-home mom, a working mom, a dad, a CEO, a teacher, a carpenter, whatever, a grocery store clerk? Why does Jesus want more for you than to just survive, to just make it by, to just live on, goldfish and whatever you can? That's
hey,
what I've been eating all week.
Crumbs in your
little
minivan.
crumbs. Yeah. Why does he want more for you, and what is at stake if we choose not to lean into the more that he wants for us? Deep question.
Well, I think about it's such a good question. When my son was so malnourished and was truly wasting away, he had been eating, but he was starving. He was not living to the full. I wasn't seeing him laughing, playing with friends. He missed all his soccer games. That season was like he was missing out on the fullness of life because he was malnourished. He was really sick. And when I think about, some of us are greatly malnourished, some of us a little bit. And again, this isn't a book that says, well, now I'm full and satisfied and I'm good. It's a book. It's a book that says each day we got to eat. What are we going to eat? What does this look like? Right. And what are we going to choose? And what patterns are we going to put into place? But my biggest thing I would say, the why, is because God finds you so delightful. Like he delights in you. And I wonder if there's a listener who feels very undelightful and they're sick of themselves and they've blown it again and they just don't know if they're valuable and worthy. And I can't get Psalm 18 out of my head. And it says he rescued me. Why? Because he delighted in me. And that word delight, the Hebrew word is hapetz. I'm going to get preaching, is hapetz. And it means to bend towards someone. That God has come to rescue us and will continue to rescue us from our pits of all kinds of things because of his great delight and bent toward you. And I don't want to miss out on the bending toward us of God, that he is just toward us in every way. His face is toward us. He's for us. He's cheering for us. I don't want us to miss the goodness of being a daughter of the Most High King and resting there and being nourished by his opinion of us.
Yeah.
One of delight.
That's really good. And even as you were talking about your son, I don't often think about like our Heavenly Father's perspective in this conversation, because you and your husband in that moment, like your feelings watching him go through this, like because of your love for your son and because that your brokenness and your like sorrow and your longing for him to have more because he's your son. I was like, man, I don't think about that a lot, about how when we as followers of Jesus choose to live starved or in this survival mode, how much that probably brings just like hurt and sorrow to the Heavenly Father, not out of like an anger of like you're horrible, but out of like but there's so much more for you. Like there's so much more enjoyment and abundance for you, and how it just breaks his heart. And so I as you were describing, I was like, oh my goodness, I don't usually look at that perspective.
I love it.
So sweet. It's so good. Well, Amy, this has been like really, really enjoyable. And
it's been so rich. Thank you.
I truly do pray that in God's sovereignty that he does bless this book, because I do think it is pinpointing such a vital topic of conversation in light of our current culture. And I think that people can find a lot of freedom and healing and health in their walk with Jesus. And so, we'll be praying that God really blesses it. And thank you for taking the time to talk with us and to have a great conversation. Really appreciate it.
You guys are fantastic. I've been so blessed, and thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. So again, Starved comes out a week from today once this release, March 21st. AmySeiffert.com if you want to get some more information. Amy, thanks again. And this concludes the episode.